We've got some overcrowding or a situation at CMPD Animal Care and Control. I know you just got off the phone interview with them, so tell us what we're dealing with here and the information that you just got.
Yeah, so Colin, you alluded to the fact that the shelter has been pretty full already lately. The shelter basically put out what they called an emergency call for fosters and adopters today. They received word that there was a criminal case where someone had been arrested. We don't know what the charges are for that person. By the way, we've inquired into that, so hopefully we can learn more about this. But the person who was arrested, apparently once authorities got to their house, they essentially realized this person had dozens and dozens of dogs. So what's happening with these dogs? Well, the shelter inevitably has to take care of them while this person is going through the court process at this point. So knowing that the shelter is jam-packed as it is, they basically were scrambling with just hours before the shelter closes with trying to figure out where they're going to put all these dogs. And quite frankly, they didn't have any room to begin with. Like you talked about, I just got off the phone with the shelter. I spoke with the communications director, Melissa Nicely, who shared that they started the day with 15 open kennels. And while that sounds like some padding, a great number maybe to start with, this is a number that can easily be overwhelmed on a normal day with the normal intakes they get. So on any given day, they could have 15 plus people come in with a dog they're trying to surrender. They could have, like in this case, a situation where someone gets arrested and Animal Care and Control has to take care of these dogs. And that's the case that they're facing. So we'll let you know at 7 o'clock, the shelter officially has now closed for the day. And the shelter at this point is kind of, I don't want to say doing kennel gymnastics, but they're trying to make it work as good as possible where they don't have to euthanize for space, which sometimes, Colin, as we've talked about before with this issue, when they run out of space, they need to find space somehow, and unfortunately, if people don't come and adopt dogs or foster dogs, euthanasia is unfortunately a way to go at that point.
Okay, so let's give people their options and obviously what the timely manner looks like for folks to contact CMPD Animal Care and Control.
Yeah, so we've talked about a couple of locations that the shelter now has. They have their normal location, which is on Byrum Drive, that's over by the airport. It's 8315 Byrum Drive. That location is open from 11 in the morning until 7 at night. They also have a location on Toomey Avenue. That is going to be a location that will open up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I believe they close at 5 in the evening. And a little background, this actually used to be the old Humane Society, and because of all the overcrowding and issues that they've been dealing with capacity recently, essentially got permission to use that as like a satellite location, but they basically can run adoptions and fosters out of that location. So I guess all of that's to say, if you go on the website, which by the way, our website has an article talking about this issue, we link you to adoptable dogs through a link on that website. You'll notice that some of the kennel locations will either say Toomey or it will actually have like a kennel number. So if it says Toomey, just know that that is a dog who is over at the Toomey satellite location, not at the main Byrum Drive location. And then something to further add here for the situation with this large intake that we had, we actually just got some images, which I think our producer Jeb has turned around quickly. These are actually the dogs that just came in today. So thank you to CMPD Animal Care and Control for sending those to us. You can see that there are some puppies and there are also some adult dogs. We're told that most of these are actually puppies, and they had some female adult dogs that were also taken in. But good news for this case as far as the process for adopting them out. It sounds like the owner has willingly surrendered them. So that cuts through a lot of red tape, whereas the shelter in some cases might have to fight to get ownership of the dogs to be able to adopt them out to the public. The situation will probably go a lot quicker now. The shelter can probably get these puppies out quickly to adoption, and hopefully there are people in the public who want to adopt some dogs because, sadly, we had a whole bunch just come in that we saw to the shelter, and they really need to get these puppies some new homes.
And I know that I want to widen this discussion because I know there's an ongoing discussion. I alluded to this previously many months ago that in Cincinnati, they have a specific no-kill shelter that works with the county government to make sure that dogs and cats aren't euthanized. They find homes. And I know that there's an ongoing push to get something like that happening here in Charlotte. Where is that at? Can you update us on what that looks like here in Charlotte?
Yeah, so we know through a lot of our reporting here and just keeping folks abreast of the push that animal advocates have pushed on city leaders to try to get accomplished, that there has been a strong community push to not only get more resources to the shelter, because as we've shared before, the shelter was built when Charlotte's population, human population, was probably less than half of what it is now. And so when you have more people who move to a community, inevitably you have more animals, more pets that are moving into the community, and a higher demand for animal services. The shelter has an increased capacity since the population essentially ballooned over several years. And so we've seen not only advocates trying to talk about the importance of expanding capacity, but also expanding the resources in the sense of, needing more staff members, needing more veterinarians to help care for these pets on staff, kennel assistants. So all of that we can see has been a push over several months, and it sounds like the city is trying to allocate money for that. Actually, when we look at the city budget, which we've talked about recently here, there was a push for some of that to be allocated in the budget, and also a separation. So this is interesting. The concept is to separate CMPD animal care and control from PD. So I don't want to say this is a unique situation, but not many communities these days we see have animal services under the police department. And that can be tricky. For example, when you think about if I'm a police chief and I know that I'm getting limited funds from the city or county, that's in control of our budget, am I going to really push for, more kennel assistants, or am I going to push for more 911 telecommunicators? And we totally understand, the reason, from a public safety standpoint, why, in some cases a police chief might push for the telecommunicators, but it doesn't mean that they don't need the kennel assistants too. It's just, limited resources, right, and trying to figure out how to allocate that. But we see the city manager pushing for, in this new budget, the separation of the two entities, where the police chief can essentially focus on police matters, and whoever is leading the animal care and control department, who we know there's a director currently over them, could basically, we don't know some of the logistics of this yet, but report directly to the city manager instead of reporting to the police chief, or report to an operations manager who then reports to the city manager. I think some of that is still up in the air, but that's the dialogue that's underway right now.
Yeah, you're right. It's very odd to have that under the police department, and it puts, kind of pigeonholes the chief, right? Because that person needs the funding that they need for their officers, for the community, and it's tough to discuss that and then obviously try and get funding for both things. So I know that that's a hard situation. Hopefully they'll figure it out, because this is something that obviously this community needs, as we are pointing out tonight, that there has to be some changes. So hopefully folks will come out, just go over again, because I think sometimes people think of adopting a pet just maybe a little bit overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of easy steps to getting towards that, or you don't even have to adopt a pet, right? There are other ways that you can save a life, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we find that fostering sometimes can be a good, foray into pet ownership if you feel like you're not sure if you want to make that leap and make that commitment. And that's something certainly that the shelter offers. So the fostering program, which it's been really great to see as far as just seeing the support for the shelter, has blossomed a lot over recent years. It's probably, several hundred people large at this point in the community who foster animals, which is super cool to see. But this is a situation where you could, for example, take a pet home for a few days, maybe a couple weeks, see how they do in your house. Because, as a pet owner, I know you have cats, sometimes cats don't like to get along with other cats. Sometimes
Right.
Cats get along with dogs, and sometimes they don't. And, if you have kids, sometimes dogs don't get along with kids, and sometimes they do. So it's a great way to kind of test that a little bit. And then the other situation that we see is called the staycation that they have at CMPD Animal Care and Control, where this is more of a set period of time. It's usually a few days. I think it can be extended in some, situations, but it's a really low commitment in the sense that you only have the animal for a few days. You can see if that's a good fit for your family, and then you can make the leap to fully adopt the dog if you want, or the cat in that situation. But also, if you don't think you're going to eventually go down the adoption path, you can, at the very least, just get the animal out of the shelter for a few days, which does a great deal to help with the capacity. It gives the shelter a little bit more breathing room because they don't have that kennel used up anymore. And it helps the animal because we see, as a volunteer, I go and walk dogs at the shelter. After a few days, and sometimes in a few weeks, if the dog is in a kennel for a while, only getting out, when a volunteer comes or a staff member comes to walk them, they can get quite stir crazy. I don't know how else to put it, but it's just like being, imagine being in a kennel for hours and hours and hours on end. Maybe you get out, maybe you don't, and it kind of will wear on the animal in a mental health perspective, really.
Yeah, there are a lot of facets to this issue that folks obviously need to pay attention to, and a lot of folks do, because whenever we put out the call, as I said on our linear show at 5 and 6, that they usually show up in droves, and people are going to need to show up, especially over the next 24 to 48 hours to make sure that dogs and potentially other animals aren't euthanized to make space. So my last thing would be anything that we missed. I know that we have this article over on WCNC.com right now for people listening. Anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Well, we should mention, since we showed some of the pictures, because the owner did surrender this large batch of puppies and, like we said, adult female dogs, they should all be, after they're vetted medically and behaviorally by the staff there, they should be good to go to be adopted quite soon. And so I'll mention that. And then the other thing I'll throw out there, and it feels like a broken record. I hear this from shelter staff time and time again. They feel like they are always putting out the call for capacity. I would just say, unfortunately, folks, be prepared to hear it more and more, because we're in a climate at this point where the shelter is just dealing with a lot of intakes. We've heard about the fact that, at one point we were hearing from the shelter evictions were rising, and usually when you get evictions rising, you see animals that get seized from those evictions, and so the economy can play a role. The fact that the population is consistently growing, that can play a role in the amount of animals. And then we're in the summertime, which, as you know, because we do clear the shelters in August usually to kind of talk about the fact how summer is super busy for shelters. We're in a period of the year where normally, on a normal basis, you just have a lot of animals that are coming in and need help. So I'll just sadly just remind folks that the problem will probably persist for weeks, if not months,
Yeah, we'll continue to obviously let folks know when the help is needed. Hopefully there will be some shifts, obviously, in the budget that we will watch for. Vanessa, appreciate your time.
Thanks for talking about this.
Yeah, of course.